Hello Berlin. Hello Potsdam. Welcome to Ricochet live on the air. This is the audiobook being read live by the author, myself, Alex Head. And I'm very lucky to be joined in the studio today by the musician Khaled. And we're going to bring the following sections of the book to you for the next hour.
Yeah, good afternoon, Berlin, Potsdam, and thank you for having me, Alex.
It's been a real pleasure to be working with Studio Ansage on this project. It's going to be broadcast every first and third Wednesday at 1 p.m. till 2 p.m. Central European time, and then we're back on the air with a new show at 1 a.m. till 2 a.m. tonight, Central European time. So that 12-hour window representing the cycle of half a day is just one of many cyclical patterns which you're going to find within the broadcast monthly, and then within the content over some 12,000 years. The book was written over a 4-year period, a 4-year cycle, you could say, finishing in 2021. And it's on Lejar Forlag in Oslo. There's a lot more to tell about the show and about what's been going on here, but that can all be discovered at Alex Head's studio. So if you want to catch up on any shows that you've missed, then head over to bandcamp.com and put in Alex Head Studio and you'll find the archive. So there's been other cycles, other sort of sequences going on in the show that involve kind of audio cues. There's a way in which one can kind of read what's going on by listening for some of those cues. I'm going to encourage people to go back to the beginning of the book, the beginning of the audiobook, and listen out for what they are, because it will make a lot more sense starting the book from the beginning in any case. For now, let's get on. We've made our way to chapter 2, which is called Breathing and Time. Is knowledge the product of lived experience only? Or is it the transformation of information into something else, something with greater agency? Where or how do I receive confirmation of a statement's truth claim? I began my own description of knowing and knowledge as a type of movement. To me, knowledge is that which jumps in and out of Elizabeth Fisher's carrier bag theory of evolution. Knowledge is deviant. Knowledge is alive. For the philosopher Emmanuel Couture, it breathes. For Judith Butler, gender is a form of knowledge that must be repeatedly re-performed. An idea I will constantly return to, but seemingly never resolve. In my view, knowledge has fallen victim to the fixity of disciplinary boundaries which operate as constraints on creativity and movement. The study of mutation and epigenetics shows us that the building blocks of life are inherently plastic, dynamic, and fraught with contradictions, ill-accommodated by the proverbial columns of wisdom that are erected as facades to the halls of power. Ricochet is a work that aims to investigate both sociology and biology, as well as history and politics. When a work becomes as baggy as this, people call it philosophy, the love of knowledge. It is also a book that attempts to hold a mirror up to myself, brackets, as a white British male, close brackets, and my previous work on deviancy, though without rehashing that debate indulgently. It is nonetheless appropriate to note that in social terms, deviancy does not have a fixed politics. As an artist, this is what attracted me towards it as a concept in the first place. Now, incorporating the responsibilities of a historian, I am obliged to acknowledge that it is a term that can be used to denigrate social actors by either political left or right wing. Therefore, the concept of deviancy, as opposed to those who are named as such, or claim themselves in fact to be, quote, deviant, quote, disruptors, strikes me as something of a tough customer. It is a sticky term at best. So for those of you who have been listening along, you'll know that that particular audio cue signals that I'm going to go off text. And that has often meant so far that something that I've considered or thought about in the last 4 years since the publication of Ricochet has kind of popped into my mind. But in this instance, there's actually a short text that I'm going to throw in because I think it speaks to this idea of deviant knowledge rather precisely, if one can do that. So I'm going to read a very short piece, a short passage from Living Time and the Integration of the Life by Maurice Nicole. And I'm reading from page 220. To turn back to older sources. In the Hermetic literature of the 3rd century AD, we find a passage in which 3 degrees of knowledge are spoken of: divine, cosmic, and human. From this standpoint, there is an ordinary knowledge, with the meanings related to it the man naturally possesses through his memory of past experiences. There is a second kind of knowledge that he can reach by study of the visible universe in which he lives. There is a third kind of knowledge that reaches as far as man, which he does not make contact with in any ordinary way. So, according to this exposition, ordinary knowledge, scientific knowledge, and the third kind of knowledge form, as it were, 3 degrees or levels, and the third kind of knowledge is not commensurable with the other kinds. It was called, quote, eternal, aeonian. The other kinds of knowledge are connected with time and with the world as it is perceptible to our senses. The third kind of knowledge from this interpretation is therefore not from the senses, it is from mind. Unquote. Indeed, where material philosophy has focused on markets, geology and the off-gas of thermodynamic processes, what cultural epigenetics offers material philosophy is the dimension of time. In my earlier work, the concept of deviancy offered a way to explore historical acts of persecution in space. Now, I have to think about what the social register would be for cultural epigenetics. Is it the judge in a courtroom, the instructor in a class, or the disciplined routine of the autodidact? So here I'm going to describe in words the visuals in the book from time to time, and the illustration that we are encountered with on page 48 is a pretty subtle one. It's two parallel lines moving in a kind of sound wave, if you like, from the top of the page to the bottom. It's a very simple sort of digitally generated line. And beneath both lines is a kind of shadow waveform that operates as a kind of broken line, insinuating a kind of echo, perhaps, or a pattern. So, where I have previously tied deviancy to a swerving movement, chaotically driven particle, for example, it is also possible to think about mutation as a kind of biological deviation. But I have chosen not to limit myself to this concept. If the social deviant was the subject of my last written inquiry, then this book represents something of a pivot, brackets as a spatial response to the swerve, close brackets, an exploration of stable epigenetic patterns. The social register I'm interested in these days is that of the mentor or instructor, rather than the social deviant. However, it is the two movements in dialogue with one another that really excite me. The swerve and the pivot, the rebellious youth and the wise mentor, the mutational and the epigenetic. One might argue that since the dominance of humankind over the organic natural world in circa 10,000 BCE, heterosexual norms, family law and policing have created social deviance as a means to uphold different forms of authority. In this view, humans have been subject, in one way or another, to the drive towards dominating a chaotic nature, the first activity of which was the category of nature itself. Life has been endlessly organized into the binary dualisms of male-female, master-enslaved, cultural-natural, sublime-deplorable, temporal-eternal, rational-irrational, and more recently, digital-human. Footnote 1. For an excellent survey of the legacy of dualisms, see The Care-Centered Economy, Rediscovering What Has Been Taken for Granted by Ina Pretorius, 2015. Mechanisms for dismantling these arguments are essential to the ways in which we gather and select for the coming years, brackets, though there is nothing inherently new about that, being interdisciplinary, as it is such as old as the hills. Fertility goddesses and the worship of cyclical death and rebirth in the animal and plant kingdoms have remained steadfast features of mythologies and religions ever since the earliest records of human culture. Footnote 2. Many of those early cave paintings feature prey animals, which seem to us anyway, quote, that those prey animals are dependent on the fertility of the goddess, just as human fertility is. Once people settled down, the goddess's fertility role shifted to the plants and animals that became the basis of village life, unquote. Professor Grant L. Voth, Myth in Human History, Lecture 14, The Goddess Inanna and Demunsi, 2010. Yet in this and the next chapter, I will reflect on the patriarchal ideologies that have been written into the very architecture of the Western world and the territories known as the Global North, despite their epistemology in more pluralistic and equally distributed gender divisions of power. I will explore the Corinthian order of Greco-Roman classical architecture as my entry point into the historical dimension of this research. In doing so, I face the immediate danger of constructing histories through hierarchical, primarily male forms of knowledge constructed around male experience. This would be insufficient to the task ahead, where thinking with the temporality of plants and at the scale of epigenetic and mutational forms of evolutionary development seeks to queer the very same orthodox renderings of history. Quote, "The story of the earth is at stake as we participate in it. We have an absolute obligation to become capable, to render each other capable of changing the story, a story of ongoingness cultivated in the earth, in the tunnels of the earth. If the makers of living and dying on this earth could begin to somehow be at risk to each other, to propose something real, to make a proposition, some mode of coherence that might have a chance." Unquote. Donna Haraway, Storytelling for Earthly Survival, by Fabrizio Terranova, 2016. However, before delving into the depths of prehistoric time in Chapter 3, this chapter attempts to develop another set of ideas around rhythm and time. Think, for example, of a rhythmically undulating sound wave. Emmanuel Kochia has drawn on the timescale of plants, as many others before. Plants are also important to the task of unpacking heteronormativity, because thinking with plants necessarily means thinking critically about vegetation, ownership and cooperation, gender and sex organs at human and non-human scales. But it is the relationship between plants and deep time that fascinates me. In admiration of Kochia's thinking, it is enriching to acknowledge that I breathe for plants, and plants breathe for me, in perhaps the most taken for granted symbiosis of the planet. This chapter is called Breathing and Time because, aside from all the historical detail that I will share with you in the following treaty, it is important to remember to breathe as I pass through the portal of this pandemic, the portal of my own sliver of life and death. Clearly, secular and religious paradigms of the universe as we know it still dispute the cause of the initial beginnings of life on Earth. This remains contentious, partly due to ideological dogma, but also because science doesn't have a sufficiently neat and tidy answer either. The image on page 51, well, there's nowhere to begin and there's nowhere to end, because it's the life cycle of an apple tree and its fruit and the seed from which the fruit bears the new tree. So we begin, let's start at 12 o'clock, why not, with the tree itself. To the right of that, following little line-drawn arrows, comes the blossom. It's a 5-leafed blossom with green foliage. From the blossom, next we have the apple. You see a slice of the apple revealing the seed, beneath which we have the seed that has already germinated and has a tail, following which the first shoot or leaf bud of the seed is shown, from which we then see this sort of very tiny shoot, sapling, tree, blossom, apple seed, shoot, and so forth. Yes, it's green cyanobacteria in the ocean that gave us life in the first instance. And as I have come to know it, but where did that come from? No one really knows. It has, however, been established that human life could only have occurred after photosynthesis, for, quote, the development of the first organisms capable of photosynthesis, cyanobacteria, prompted an accumulation of oxygen. Thanks to plants, the Earth definitively became the metaphysical space of breath. Emmanuel Kochia, The Life of Plants, A Metaphysics of Mixture, 2017. Intriguingly, at the dawn of life lie plants, but also mutation. Quote, mutation, so often a destroyer of life, is also its creator. Without it, the variety of living things on Earth simply wouldn't exist. It is, in the Darwinian view of life, the raw material of evolution. Unquote. Melvin Bragg, Genetic Mutation. In Our Time, BBC Radio 4, December 6, 2007. My argument therefore follows that in order to understand the building blocks of life, I also need to investigate the history of mutation as far back as possible. I need ways to conceptualize 1 million years, 1 billion years, and even 3.9 billion years. This is because in order to trace the formalization of ideas around life, death, and renewal into matrifocal or patriarchal systems of governance and ideology, it is beneficial to have a roadmap of the history of life itself from secular and non-secular perspectives. The funny thing is that at times they begin to match up.